Welcome to the Foundation. This episode is brought to you by the Foundation. I'm just playing. This episode is entitled Why Most People Will Never Achieve Wealth Independence. And I'm going to do this very, very quick because I don't want to take up too much of your time. I don't like to be long winded, even though generally I am. But there's something I've come across in all these years of teaching private trusts. And generally, it's a fear. It's a fear. And, I've thought and contemplated the fear that I've witnessed with regards to people who at first they're very very excited and adamant about setting up their private estate and setting up these private contractual entities with all these protections and so on and so forth. But when they get into it, they go dark. Um, they stop showing up to training, even though they've paid for the training. And I feel that you guys would be appalled and very surprised if you knew how many people pay for the training and then don't finish it, don't utilize it. But they'll pay for the training and then they just won't show up. I'll send emails, I'll call them. And regardless of what they say, ultimately, in my opinion, it comes down to the fact that they are no longer prioritizing their trust administration education for whatever reason. But energetically, I feel like a lot of the times I pick up on fear, right? So I've been thinking about that, and I'm going to talk about that during this episode of the Foundation. And we're going to get into it with regards to what I think and answer the question why most people will never achieve wealth independence, or describe the reasoning behind the statement of why most people will never achieve wealth independence. It has a lot to do with the way this system is set up. Let's start with that. This is a debt-based system, economic system. And a lot of people don't comprehend what that means and how that affects them in their day-to-day, I won't say lives, but their day-to-day interaction with the commercial realm. How about that? But let's get started. I appreciate y'all being here. I trust you are, enjoying your week. The dance is going lovely. As we begin, let's make sure to check out welcome to the foundation.com. Sign up for the email list at the least, very least. That's all I'll say. That's what I'm going to say. I would look at silver. We're not going to look at silver. We'll do that mostly during current events. But why most people will never achieve wealth independence? I put this together in Microsoft Word. I saved it as a PDF. I hope you enjoy it. I just threw it together. I'm not a lawyer or an attorney. I can't give legal advice. Right? Let's go. Perception of secrecy. Private trusts are often viewed as secretive arrangements. That's the nature of them. Right? This perception arises because the lack of public registration. And this is true. Unlike corporations, many trusts do not require public registration, leading to the belief that they can operate without oversight. And that belief is true if you're talking about state statutory agents or agencies. But, there's a board of trustees. Private documents, trust agreements, or contracts are typically private contracts and are not filed in public records unless involved in legal disputes. And your good or indenture worth its weight is going to stipulate that if it is ever registered or filed in the public, it must immediately be dissolved by the board of trustees. And there's a reason for that. And the perception of secrecy is just that, a perception. There are definitely parties, and I would say individuals, agents that should not be privy to, the administration and I guess, the existence of a trust or private estate. But there are those who it's all their business and it's common knowledge, and that would generally be the family, right? Asset protection concerns. Many people associate private trust with the ability to shield assets from creditors and legal claims. That's true, because that's what it is. This can create fear due to trusts having the asset shielding capability, and they can place assets into a state of ownerless limbo, making them difficult for creditors or tax authorities to access. This is great. It's a great example. That's absolutely true. But the ownerless limbo, and I want to address that specifically because I believe that this is one of the fears. It There is an owner. The owner is the trust. The trust is private and it's not subject to the whims of the several legislatures, the state courts, or anything like that. That guarantees private administration through generations. But we've been taught publicly, and a lot of times, if we can't see things in the public or get confirmation from the public, we don't believe, and that's why. That's one of the reasons why most will never reach financial wealth or financial independence. Facilitation of financial crimes. The secrecy surrounding trust can enable tax evasion, money laundering, and other financial abuses. And that's mostly what you hear about in the public. You'll hear, oh, yeah, very wealthy people, rich people, multi-generational wealth, Trumps and stuff. They deal with trust, but, if you don't have money, you shouldn't be touching that. That's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Misunderstanding of legal framework. The complexity of trust law can lead to misunderstandings, such as impenetrable shield myth. There's a common myth that trusts provide complete protection from scrutiny, which is not entirely accurate. Legal disclosure requirements exist in many jurisdictions, especially during audits or legal proceedings. And here, you don't have to fulfill those requirements because the trust is private. But depending on if it's an allegation from a state revenue department, or if there is litigation against the trust, that litigation can be successful and the audit can be successful due to lack of disclosure. So it's up to the Board of Trustees when and what is to be disclosed. And at what points in time are they to stand on the non-disclosure agreement that they signed and to stand on the privacy of the contract. Complex control structures. The intricate nature of how trusts are managed can confuse authorities and the public, leading to fears about who truly controls the assets. And you'll have state agents, right, acting in the capacity of state agents, or an agency of the state, make wild claims. Trust can't do that. Attorneys will say the same thing. A trust can't do that. I've dealt with it. But they're speaking on statutory trusts. And without the knowledge of the demarcation line between statutory trust and private contract trust, it's difficult to ascertain who is definitely or possibly telling the truth and who isn't, and what is correct and what is not correct. That's definitely a part of it. I know it's a part of it. And yeah, complex control structures. It's complex. It's too difficult. It's that turns a lot of people off. These are some of the factors that contribute to fear surrounding private trust among those unfamiliar with their legal and operational frameworks. Understanding the actual functions and regulations governing trust can help alleviate some of these concerns. Moving forward, how not being taught publicly can increase fear or suspicion. Unknown equals assumed risky. If people rarely hear how private trusts actually work as a legal tool and with limits, they're more likely to fill the gap with the worst case assumptions. Some people think, hey, man, I can use the Trustee IN instead of my social. I've heard some of the craziest stuff of all the things you could do with a private trust. And I've also heard On the other side of the spectrum, some crazy stuff that people have assumed that you can't do with a private trust. And I pride myself on being able to logically and substantively correct people in their misguided presumptions. But ooh. Association by stories, not details. When the only exposure comes from anecdotes, media, or lawyerly explanations, people may overweigh the shady uses, hiding assets, avoiding creditors, rather than the legitimate ones. I made a punctual error. Actually, it was just it's supposed to be way instead of weight. I'm sorry, y'all. Rather than the legitimate ones, estate planning, managing incapacity, certain tax administration goals where permitted. So, most people are looking at the benefits that they can achieve in the public with the private trust. And that's not necessarily how it goes. Most people are looking at the personal benefits that they can achieve. And, trust in its nature encompasses generations, heirs. We have lower baseline literacy without common vocabulary, trustees, beneficiaries, duties, reporting, so on and so forth. The topic feels technical and intimidating, which often reads as dangerous to outsiders or scary. And this is one of my things, right? I believe that there was a time shortly after high school or college, or probably during, where we decided that it's not okay to be wrong anymore, that we can't be wrong anymore. And being wrong was negative, came with negative, F grades and things of that nature. And that ideology of not being wrong anymore precipitates people, I believe, to not really try something new because they don't want to be wrong. They don't want to mess it up. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe this is a big deal. People not wanting to be wrong and fear. But yeah, people not wanting to be wrong. Credibility gap. If you can't verify basics from accessible sources, it's harder to evaluate claims. So uncertainty turns into fear. Let me say this, right? So you have most people that do a search, right? They'll pull up statutory laws, and statutory laws are very easily accessible. State statutory laws, and they do searches about trusts and stuff like that. And a lot of times, statutory trust policy will show up that is in contradistinction to what they were told or heard about trust. And they'll be like, well, I don't find it. Most people don't comprehend that the vast majority of trust substantiation, private contract trust substantiation, is in Supreme Court case law, not at the state level, the Supreme Court, Article 3. These are cases that were brought against a trust, a private trust. The lower court, the Article 1 court, ruled against the trust, and the trustees appealed the decision of the lower court to the higher courts, and it made it into the Supreme Court. Supreme Court, Article 3, they operate more so off the Constitution than with state statutes. I think that's a big deal. Statutory trust law governance sits in a state's jurisdiction, while private trust contracts can reduce what the state otherwise collects or controls, depending on how the trust is used and which taxes or regimes apply. That's a big deal. Reduction, elimination, how private trusts can operate, potentially revenue loss, and why that can influence attitudes toward them. I'm sorry, how private trusts can create potential revenue loss and why that can influence attitude toward them. Tax-based erosion, state losses, taxable income, transactions. If a private trust is used to shift income, dividends, capital gains, or investment growth to beneficiaries, or to retain earnings inside the trust, the state may collect less through lower taxable income, reduced taxable events that would otherwise occur, like selling assets, right? So if there's no sale, there's no sales tax. Different taxation rules for trusts versus individuals. There's definitely rules. Inability to force state taxation due to the lack of jurisdiction. That's I think that speaks for itself. Asset transfer effects. Many jurisdictions raise revenue from inheritance, successions, estate taxes, gift transfers, gift taxes, and probate or estate administration related fees. Generally, contract trusts are structured so assets are held outside probate and with different timing or mechanisms for transfer, if at all. Most private trusts never sell or transfer its assets. Only the trustees change over time. This is a big deal. And people think, oh, I lose if I lose individual ownership or individual control of my stuff, then I lose control if it's not titled in quote my name. No, you are the trustee. And that's another thing. Most people think that in order to, deal with the trust, they have to be a grantor. No, no, no. Even when taxes don't drop to zero, states can see delayed collection or reduced base or tax base at the moment they'd otherwise count on collecting. So even if there is a tax owed by the trust, it's generally more difficult to collect that tax from a state level, from a contract trust or private trust, than it is from a statutory trust. They have less remedies. Just think about it. Administrative and enforcement cost or burden. This is regards to the states. States generally still want compliance, so they may respond with reporting requirements, anti-avoidance rules, and audit or enforcement capacity. But enforcement can be harder where arrangements are private, complex, or involve trustees and beneficiaries spread across jurisdictions. So loss may be partly lower collection, higher cost to audit and detect non-compliance, reduced certainty of revenue forecasting. And this is for the states. This goes to, speak as to why the states don't promote private trusts. It's what's the word? What's the phrase? Why am I drawing a blank? Conflict of interest. That's the phrase. I got it. Regulatory control versus private ordering. States may view trusts as undermining state objectives. Trusts are private ordering. Parties can arrange wealth and governance without the state running it day to day. Some states may prefer mechanisms that keep more economic activity legible to the tax authority or the courts, especially regarding creditor properties, family support obligations, child support, fiduciary oversight and disclosure standards, and as well as escalation paths when disputes arise. Even when private trusts are legal, the state may perceive them as reducing its leverage over how wealth and claims are administered. You gotta understand why this is not promoted. It's not promoted. Jurisdictional arbitrage. If some jurisdictions make trust formation or trust taxation more favorable and others are restrictive, people may establish trusts where the rules are better. This can function like a tax competition dynamic. So basically, the state or jurisdiction where the settler lives may lose revenue because they're setting up a trust in a different jurisdiction. This is if it's coming under state jurisdiction. Take this with a grain of salt. All private trusts most private trusts do not come under state jurisdiction. It's the activity, right? Does it have a permit? Does it have a license? Does it offer a regulated, whether it's county, city, state, a regulated service or good? With private trusts, generally, no state may gain fees or tax receipts. This can create political pressure to restrict or scrutinize private trusts or to emphasize statutory public alternatives. See Express Trust Under the Common Law, PDF. Y'all should read that. Express Trust Under the Common Law. Email me. I'll send it to you for the free, not for the fee. Just put in that, this is how I mess myself up. So This is my present self taking care of my future self. Just put in the subject line, express trust under the common law. So I know what I'm sending you. Because I say, just send me an email and I send it to you. And I'll get the email, send me the PDF. And I've said that a lot. I don't know which one you were talking about. I apologize. If you've never gotten an email sent to you by request, that's probably the reason why. I didn't know which one to send. But yeah, that's a great document to check out. Statutory trust versus private trust isn't automatically a revenue story. It's worth separating terms. Statutory trusts are usually created by legislation for specific purposes and often come with defined structures, oversight, and predictable administration. Private trusts, on the other hand, are created by private parties, private contract. The state's role is typically enforcement of rules of the trust where applicable, plus court authority involvement in trustee beneficiary disputes or compliance and adherence to the contract. So, a trustee can bring an action in the state court against the other trustee for breach of contract. Very, very important. If the state designated statutory trust frameworks to channel activity into a more controlled system, policymakers may view private trust as an escape hatch, not necessarily illegal, but potentially less aligned with the revenue or administration objectives behind the statutory design. This is why they won't promote. This is why you don't hear about this stuff. This is why you hear about it from like a guru or some TikTok ad or something of that nature. The only people who stand to gain the most from private trust administration are the people who are receiving the education, not the quote promoters. Generally, because if you go to the right organization, you're going to pay for the training and that's it. Now you know how to create and administer private trust all the way through, and what is the return revenue or what are we going to sell you again? What are we going to, what do we charge you for again? That's why beware of people who sell trust and minutes and, beware. That's all. Just beware. Let's move forward. The conflict is states want predictable tax intake and administrative legibility. While private trust can legally change who pays, when they pay, and how visible the underlying assets, income are, and they can do this with less direct ongoing oversight than statutory mechanisms. This can lead to attempted rules and reporting for private trusts. Good luck with that. Political narratives that make private trusts seem riskier than statutory ones. That's fear-mongering, some would say. And reforms that attempt to narrow tax arbitrage. Well, that would be, I know you've heard of the Massachusetts Trust, right? Or Delaware Trust. That's what I'm talking about. As far as, perceivably, those are more beneficial jurisdictions for a statutory trust. I don't know. I've never tried it. I've never administered, a Delaware trust or a Massachusetts trust. Statutory trust, that is. But I just want you to think of all of the reasons that may exist as to why there's fear surrounding this type of administration. No one from the government is going to say good job. Not in their government capacity, their agency capacity or otherwise. Hey, good job for setting up a private estate. No one from the federal government is going to say good job for setting up a private estate. No one from the state government or the federal government can really tell you and assist you in the administration. You would have to find an attorney. If you have to do an attorney, I would highly suggest it's a contract attorney that's familiar with constitutional law, a constitutional contract attorney. I don't see what other attorney would assist you. I really don't. But don't let fear stop you from living the life you deserve. Don't let it happen. Sign up for trustee training today. And I would invite you to email me directly, admin@welcometothefoundation.com, and let's discuss how we can make trustee training affordable for you personally. A closed mouth does not get fed. The worst thing you're going to hear is no, but I don't really like saying that word. So, if you've ever had fear with regards to private trust administration, and if this episode helped you, I definitely invite you to sign up for trustee training at welcometothefoundation.com or shoot me an email. Let's talk about it. Set up a consultation. I only charge $55 an hour, and it's usually like $55 for 2-3 hours, depending on how much time you have, because I got time. This is uplifting everyone when we get into this. And as I said, I didn't want to take up too much of your time. So with that being said, enjoy yourself. Take care of yourself. Thanks for checking out the episode. Make sure you say 10 things that you're thankful for before you go to sleep tonight and every night. It's very important. And I'll catch y'all tomorrow on current events. I got some good ones. Peace, y'all.